Picture this. A 17-year-old kid with cerebral palsy is lying on the concrete, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, tears streaming down his face. Standing over him is a third-degree black belt, 220 pounds of pure muscle and arrogance, flexing his knuckles like he just conquered a mountain. The crowd gasps. Some pull out their phones. Others look away in disgust, but nobody moves to help. That's when a quiet man in his 70s, wearing a simple gray hoodie and worn jeans, steps forward from the back of the crowd. Most people wouldn't look twice at him. He's not imposing. He's not flashy. He looks like someone's grandfather heading to the grocery store. But when he speaks, his voice carries a weight that makes the entire parking lot go silent. "Son," he says, his eyes locked on the black belt, "I think you've made a mistake." The bully turns around, ready to add another victim to his afternoon's work. He has no idea he's about to face a legend. He has no idea that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who have absolutely nothing to prove. The Riverside Community Center sits on the edge of town like a beacon of hope. Every Saturday morning, it transforms into something magical. Kids from all walks of life gather here for the weekly martial arts demonstration, some in wheelchairs, some with learning disabilities, some just looking for a place to belong. Today's event was supposed to celebrate inclusion. Local dojos were invited to showcase their skills, inspiring young people to find confidence through martial arts. Banners hung between the oak trees, strength through unity, and everybody is strong. 17-year-old Marcus sat in his wheelchair near the front, his eyes wide with fascination. Born with cerebral palsy, Marcus had spent most of his life watching from the sidelines. His muscles didn't always obey his commands. His speech sometimes slurred when he got excited. But his spirit burned brighter than most. Today, watching the demonstrations, he felt something he'd never experienced before. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could be strong too. His mother, Patricia, stood behind him, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. She'd brought him here hoping to boost his confidence after a particularly brutal week at school. The bullying had gotten worse lately, kids calling him names, imitating his movements, leaving him eating lunch alone in the library. The morning had been perfect. Young students from various dojos performed their katas with precision. Masters spoke about discipline, respect, and the true meaning of strength. Children cheered, parents smiled, until Derek Mason arrived. Derek Mason wasn't supposed to be there. The 28-year-old had been banned from 3 local dojos for his aggressive behavior and complete disregard for martial arts philosophy. But Derek didn't care about philosophy. He cared about dominance. Standing 6'2" with arms like tree trunks and a third-degree black belt around his waist, Derek had spent years using his skills for all the wrong reasons. Bar fights, road rage incidents, intimidating anyone who looked at him sideways. Martial arts, to him, wasn't about self-improvement. It was about proving he was the alpha dog in every room he entered. He strutted into the community center's parking lot like he owned the place, his black GI immaculate, his belt tied with military precision. The crowd parted instinctively. Even without knowing his reputation, people could sense the menace radiating from him. "What's all this?" he announced loudly, gesturing dismissively at the demonstration area. "Kiddie karate hour?" The current demonstrator, a 12-year-old yellow belt, faltered mid-kata. The instructor quickly stepped forward, trying to diffuse the situation with a polite smile. "We're having a community demonstration," the instructor explained calmly. "All skill levels are welcome to watch and learn." Derek laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made several children step closer to their parents. "Learn? From these weekend warriors?" He cracked his knuckles slowly, deliberately. "Maybe they should see what real martial arts look like." The air grew thick with tension. Parents began quietly gathering their children, but Marcus, from his wheelchair in the front row, couldn't take his eyes off this imposing figure. "You know what I hate?" Derek continued, his voice rising. "All this touchy-feely, everyone's special garbage. Martial arts isn't about participation trophies. It's about separating the strong from the weak." His eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Marcus. "Like him. What's he even doing here? This is about strength, not whatever that is." The words hit Martin like a physical blow. He'd heard worse at school, But somehow this felt different, more public, more humiliating. He felt his mother's hand tighten on his shoulder, felt the eyes of the entire crowd on him. Patricia stepped forward, her voice shaking with controlled anger. My son has every right to be here. This event is about inclusion. Inclusion? Derek's laugh was even crueler now. Lady, look around. This is martial arts, not a charity case parade. Your kid couldn't defend himself against a stiff breeze. Something inside Martin snapped. Despite his mother's restraining hand, despite the voice in his head screaming at him to stay quiet, he found his voice. I'm not weak, Martin said, his words careful but clear. I'm stronger than you think. The parking lot went dead silent. Derek's face darkened. Being challenged by anyone was unacceptable, but being challenged by someone he considered beneath him? That was unforgivable. What did you just say to me, freak? Derek, that's enough. The head instructor tried to intervene, but Derek was beyond reason now. Marcus surprised everyone, including himself. Using his arms to propel his wheelchair, he moved around his mother and positioned himself directly in front of Derek. You don't scare me, Marcus said, though his voice trembled. Being mean doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. For a moment, everyone held their breath, hoping Derek would see reason, would recognize the courage it took for a disabled teenager to stand up to him. Instead, Derek's face contorted with rage. You want to know about strength? Let me show you. Before anyone could react, Derek grabbed Marcus under the arms and literally lifted him out of his wheelchair. The crowd gasped. Several people shouted, no! But it happened too fast. This is what real strength looks like, Derek snarled. And then he did the unthinkable. He slammed Marcus down onto the concrete parking lot with tremendous force. The sound Marcus's left arm made when it hit the ground was one that nobody present would ever forget. A sharp crack that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. Marcus's scream cut through the air like a knife. As Marcus lay on the concrete, clutching his obviously broken arm, something shifted in the crowd. The shock and horror transformed into something else. A collective rage at witnessing such a grotesque display of bullying. Patricia dropped to her knees beside her son, tears streaming down her face. Someone call 911, she screamed. Derek stood over them, breathing heavily. For a split second, something that might have been regret flashed across his face. But then his ego kicked back in. Maybe now he'll know his place, he muttered. That's when the crowd heard footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate. From the back of the gathering, an older man emerged. He was average height, maybe 73 years old, with silver hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hard-earned wisdom. He wore a simple gray hoodie, faded jeans, and well-worn sneakers. To most people, he looked like any grandfather you might see at a park. But there was something about the way he moved, something about the absolute stillness in his presence that made the crowd instinctively part before him. Chucknorris had been visiting his old friend Tom, who ran the community center, when he heard about the demonstration. He'd planned to slip in quietly, maybe encourage a few kids, then leave without fanfare. At 73, he preferred staying out of the spotlight these days. But as he'd watched from the back of the crowd, seeing Derek's escalating aggression, something inside him had awakened. The same protective instinct that had driven him through decades of martial arts, military service, and a lifetime of standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. When he saw Marcus broken on the ground, that instinct became a roaring fire. Son, Chuck said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority, I think you've made a mistake. Derek spun around, ready to intimidate this new challenger. Who the hell are... The words died in his throat. He was looking at Chucknorris. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Derek just stared. Everyone in America knew that face. Even someone as self-absorbed as Derek couldn't miss those distinctive features, couldn't ignore the legend standing before him. You're? Derek's voice came out as a whisper. I'm disappointed, Chuck replied simply. He knelt beside Marcus, his weathered hands gentle as he checked the boy's arm. Hey there, champion. You're going to be okay. That was incredibly brave what you did. Marcus, despite his pain, managed a weak smile. Are you really? I'm really just a guy who doesn't like bullies, Chuck said softly. Then he stood and faced Derek. The transformation in the crowd was immediate. Cell phones appeared, but not to record violence, to capture what everyone sensed was about to become a legendary moment of justice. "You want to know about strength?" Chuck asked Derek, echoing the bully's earlier words. "Real strength isn't about hurting people who can't fight back. Real strength is protecting them." Derek tried to salvage his ego. "Look, I didn't know you were here, Mr. Norris. I have all your movies and—" "Stop talking," Chuck said calmly. The two words carried more authority than all of Derek's shouting combined. "You just assaulted a brave child who showed more courage in 5 minutes than you've shown in your entire life." The crowd was dead silent except for the sound of approaching sirens. "I want you to think about something," Chuck continued, his voice conversational but his eyes laser-focused on Derek. "You're a third-degree black belt. You have size, strength, and skill, and you used all of that to hurt a 17-year-old boy with cerebral palsy." Each word landed like a physical blow. "I'm 73 years old," Chuck interrupted when Derek tried to speak. "I probably shouldn't be fighting anyone anymore. My joints ache in the morning. I need reading glasses." A few people in the crowd almost smiled despite the tension. "But you know what?" Chuck took a single step toward Derek. "If you want to keep hurting kids, you'll have to go through me first." It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the quiet confidence of a man who had never backed down from protecting the innocent. The fight everyone expected never came. Faced with Chuck Norris's unwavering moral authority and the collective judgment of the crowd, something inside Derek finally cracked. Whether it was conscience, fear, or simple recognition that he was completely outmatched, he began to crumble. I'm sorry," he whispered, looking down at Marcus. "Yes, you did mean to hurt him," Chuck said firmly. "The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" The ambulance arrived and paramedics quickly began treating Marcus. As they worked, he kept looking over at Chuck with an expression of pure awe. "Chuck Norris stood up for me," he whispered to his mother. "He said I was brave." Police officers arrived and arrested Derek for assault. As they led him away, he looked back at Chuck one last time. "Mr. Norris," he called out desperately, "what should I do? How do I fix this?" Chuck studied him for a long moment. "You start by accepting responsibility. Then you get help for whatever's eating you up inside that makes you want to hurt innocent people." As the ambulance prepared to leave, Chuck approached the vehicle. "Hey, champion," he said, gently clasping Marcus's uninjured hand. "What you did today, standing up to that bully even though you were scared, that took more courage than any movie stunt I've ever performed." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "But I got hurt. I wasn't strong enough." "Strength isn't about winning every fight," Chuck said. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand up for what's right, even when you know you might lose. You did that today. That makes you a warrior." He pulled out his personal challenge coin and pressed it into Marcus's palm. "This is for you, for reminding an old martial artist what courage really looks like." 3 months later, the Riverside Community Center held another demonstration. This time, Martin was part of it. Working with adaptive martial arts instructors, Martin had begun training. His kata wasn't perfect by traditional standards. His movements were sometimes jerky, his balance occasionally uncertain. But every motion carried something more powerful than technical precision. It carried heart. Chuck Norris was there too, sitting quietly in the back. When Martin finished his demonstration, their eyes met across the crowd, and Martin touched the challenge coin he now wore around his neck. After the event, a reporter approached Chuck for an interview. "Mr. Norris, what's the lesson here?" Chuck smiled, watching as Martin demonstrated techniques to fascinated children. "The lesson is that the strongest people in the world are often the ones who have nothing to prove. They don't need to hurt others to feel powerful. They know that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." As he walked away, Chuck left the reporter with one final thought. The same thought that had guided him through decades of martial arts training and life itself. In a world full of people trying to prove how tough they are, be the person who proves how kind you can be. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's showing them a better way to be human.